Let's get some analysis now from former Assistant Director of the FBI, who now works with the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, Ron Hosko, and retired Green Beret Michael Waltz, who served as Senior Counterterrorism Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Your take, first of all, on this, Ron, and as you look at this, the tactic obviously does fit what we've seen, these vehicle attacks in recent days, recent months and weeks, back to Berlin, Nice, Spain. You've seen it again and again.
Right. It has the ISIS fingerprints. It has the ISIS DNA, I believe. This is the sort of attack that ISIS has called for. They have made innocent civilians as legitimate targets of their attacks. You know what concerns me, Brett, is within the last 10 days, 2 weeks, the head of MI5 had said that the current terror threat stream is as intense as he's ever seen it in 34 years in Great Britain. The speed with which attacks are being planned, the number of targets for them, some 3,000 active investigations, 500 of them pretty intense. I think here America's threat is a fraction of that. But still, the speed and the intensity, the time between flash and bang, is very, very concerning for the counterterrorism professionals in America.
You heard the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mike McCall, mention this, Mike, about Adnani, this ISIS spokesperson, if you will. In Atlantic magazine, back in 2015, they wrote it this way. Sheikh Abdul Muhammad al-Adnani, the Islamic State's chief spokesman, called on Muslims in Western countries, such as France, Canada, to find an infidel and smash his head with rock, poison him, run him over with a car, or destroy his crops. To Western ears, the biblical-sounding punishments, the stoning and crop destruction, juxtaposed strangely with his more modern-sounding call to vehicular homicide. There has since been a lot of quotes about using vehicles, and we've seen that in efforts.
Well, and ISIS and Al-Qaeda have their own magazines as well. In the case of ISIS, it's Inspire magazine, and they've actually been calling for a truck-type attack in New York, in Vegas, in LA for a couple of years now. You know, one should ask how they're producing their own magazine, and just to take a step back for a moment and to go a little strategic, that's why I think we have to stay on offense. We can only do so much defense against these types of attacks. That's why the president's decision to stay engaged and on the offense in Afghanistan, what the Green Berets are doing in Niger against Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, the Navy SEAL raid last night against ISIS in Libya, the president's speech in Saudi Arabia on his first trip calling on Muslim-majority nations, moderate Muslim-majority nations, to take this problem on from the inside. It's all interconnected. And, Brett, I think my bottom line here is we are in a global war against Islamic extremism. It's at war with us, and we are fighting it in Kandahar and in Raqqa, and now we're fighting it at home, unfortunately. But we have to stay on offense to take these sanctuaries down and then put a broader strategy in place of how do you undermine the ideology. Just as we undermined and discredited the ideology of communism, we need to do the same thing with the ideology of Islamic extremism.
Ron, from an investigative standpoint, what's happening right now in trying to get the web that this guy had any contact with?
Right, they are have speeded their way to the Home Depot. They are looking at every piece of
where you got the pickup truck,
where the truck was rented from.
And I think actually we're looking at that now.
It appears to be they are collecting across government every piece of intelligence that we have on this person to see, did the FBI ever touch him before, NYPD, the agency, NSA. To add to what Michael had said, I think part of that offensive strategy has to be renewal of 702 authority for NSA and the coordination with the FBI. We need to be listening to these potential targets overseas. If they are touching Americans, we want the FBI to have that information. We want them to action that information.
Brett, if I can just jump in very quickly, one thing that a lot of folks are no longer mentioning, but I want to be sure to point out, is Edward Snowden. He took essentially all of the apps, all of the software, essentially all of the systems around the world that we have trouble penetrating because of encryption, and dumped it out there for all of these terrorist groups to use. And, I hold him accountable, whether it's Barcelona or London or now New York or Orlando. I hold him accountable as well for basically giving the bad guys the means to communicate that's been very tough on our law enforcement and intelligence agencies.
I just want to point back to something else that Chairman McCall said, and that is looking at one of these websites, the picture on a cell phone of that area in the west side of New York City, a photo taken near Houston facing south, with the logo on the cell phone displayed, an ISIS symbol. Now, obviously, I don't think people at that point could say that this is where this attack is going to happen, but it does send a signal that they were looking at that area.
Unquestionably, look, we have a learning, evolving, metastasizing enemy. Yep. This is an enemy that is not here just for today. It's not here just for a couple of weeks. They're here seriously, and they have a long-term perspective on attacking America. The notion that they can post something up on an internal, a magazine that they're disseminating on the internet around the globe for anyone who wants to read it, they are looking to inspire just this sort of activity. If somebody takes that bait and they go, that's the fear of the FBI.
1,000 investigations in 50 states, in all 50 states?
Right. Being reprioritized every day at FBI headquarters, assets, resources being moved around to address the highest priority threats, and hoping, like the Brits and like the French, that we get it right every time.
I mean, that's a threat that we just don't even acknowledge or think about, the fact that there are that many investigations ongoing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And the fact is, I mean, the ugly fact is the Bureau cannot possibly track and follow and stay on top of that many individuals. So, again, we can, unfortunately, we have to bat 1,000. The terrorists only have to get one through. And that's why, I keep saying over and over again, we have to stay after those sanctuaries. We may have defeated the Islamic State as a state that it liked to call itself, but we haven't defeated it as a movement, and we're seeing it not only metastasize all over North Africa, but we're seeing it finally get infiltrators through. And the thing I can't overemphasize is people in that part of the world respect strength, and they respect who they think is going to win because they're making life and death decisions every day, and that's why we need to hit them hard over there, while our brothers and sisters in law enforcement are defending us here over at home. But
I guess the question, Ron, is that for people who just walk around and say, hey, how does this not happen more? Right. It seems like, what prevents the bad guy from getting the truck and going down the bike path?
Well, very little prevents this sort of activity. And as I mentioned earlier, that concern about flash to bang, that the space between someone being inspired to do this terror and actually taking the steps forward to do it is getting increasingly small. That's the space that law enforcement is typically working in. This is not Al-Qaeda, where they were trying to get you to a training camp in Afghanistan or in Pakistan. These guys are doing it on the internet and do it in your own methodology. So that is the concern of law enforcement. Fortunately, because of tips and clues, because of interagency collaborations, the FBI and their partners have defeated dozens of attacks here at home. One recently within the last 2 weeks in Miami, where an attacker wanted to detonate a bomb at a mall in Miami, or outside of Miami. The FBI's been incredibly successful, but as Michael said, we have to keep every puck out of the net. And if one gets through, you look incredibly bad. And so they will learn from this. They will figure out what was missed, what could have been caught, how to defeat it the next time. But unfortunately, this may be the new norm.
Yeah, and from a counterterrorism perspective, they obviously feel in New York fairly confident that tonight they're moving forward with this Halloween parade, and they are moving forward with, while more presence on the street, trying to tell people to keep going about their business.
Well, that's right. The goal of the terrorist is to inspire fear, and the worst thing we could do is to hunker down and be afraid. I hope everyone up there, our fellow citizens in New York, get out tonight in defiance. We've seen that in Paris, we've seen that in Barcelona, we've seen that in London, that we will not be cowed. We are the United States of America. And as we saw, as I mentioned earlier, as we saw with the Navy SEAL raid in Libya just a few nights ago, You can run, but you can't hide. We will come after you, and we will find you, and justice will be served.
Yeah. So, I mean, these operations going after ISIS, it's not just happening in Syria and Iraq, it's happening all over.
It's happening all over. As we've discussed, 60 to 80 countries in any given day. We have special operators out there trying to keep this country safe.
Ron, Mike, we appreciate the time.
All right.
Pleasure.